The first thing I saw when I walked in wasn't the chandeliers or the ridiculous ice sculpture shaped like her company logo. It was the video playing in a loop on 3 screens. 10 years of growth, awards, investor dinners, late nights, with her team at off-site cabins that looked suspiciously like 5-star resorts. 10 years of brilliance, they called it. But not once, did they mention the man who stayed up for 39 straight hours fixing the platform after it crashed during beta. The man who coded the original backend in a studio apartment that reeked of burned coffee and soldered wires. The man who never asked for equity, just a license and a clause she never read. I stood near the back, no name tag, no spotlight, just a tailored black suit and a smile that didn't touch my eyes. Her new CTO passed me and said, "Sir, this area is for investors only," and I just nodded, like I hadn't signed the first investor agreement with a personal loan I still haven't told my family about. The lights dimmed, someone clinked a fork against a glass, and then she stepped onto the stage. Gold dress, hair perfect, a mic in her hand, and the room in her pocket. 10 years ago, she began, this was just a dream, a garage idea, a skeleton crew, and some people helped. Some people honestly were just stepping stones. A few in the audience chuckled, unsure if they were supposed to. Then she smiled, that smile, the one she used when she was about to say something cruel and pretend it was clever. "And of course," she said, holding her champagne up, "some people were just practice. But hey, practice makes perfect, right?" The crowd laughed, louder this time, even the old VC with a pacemaker. I didn't react, I didn't frown, I didn't storm out or make a scene. I just lifted my own glass, tilted it toward her, and let the smile settle. Calm. I held it long enough for her to see me in the crowd. Her eyes locked on mine for maybe half a second, then slid past me like I was a waiter. So I walked out. Through the side door, past the valet who didn't look up from his vape pen, and into the night air that tasted like smog and perfume and something old dying beneath something expensive. I didn't look back. And if you're still listening this far into the story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Yeah, I know everyone says it, but more than 97% of people listen without subscribing, and honestly, it motivates the team here to keep digging up stories like this. Thanks. Anyway, what she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, is that I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to confirm. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. A public statement, a clear dismissal, something that crossed the line from ungrateful to defamatory. Because buried deep in the original operating agreement, Clause 17C, was one very simple rule. If one co-founder publicly defames the other, the founding license is subject to immediate revocation, no questions asked. She had forgotten, or assumed I had. I hadn't. That clause was my safety net, my scalpel, my exit strategy, and now it was live. When I got back to my rental apartment, the same one we lived in before the Series A round, the one she called too cramped for ambition, I opened the fireproof safe beneath the floorboards, pulled out the black binder I hadn't touched in almost a decade, labeled Operating Agreement V1, 0, page 47. There it was, still crisp. Clause 17C, founding license revocation, trigger, public defamation. All I needed now was a copy of the footage, and someone who knew how to make it hurt. I didn't go home angry, I didn't rage, I didn't scream into a steering wheel or call a friend to vent. I sat in the airport lounge with a ginger ale and watched her speech again on someone's LinkedIn story. The part where she said practice got clipped into a neat little reel, captioned with emojis and #boss energy. My name was never said, but that didn't matter. I was the ghost she'd exorcised with applause, so I smiled. Not the broken kind, the kind with teeth, no text, no warning, no dramatic midnight confrontation. I got on a red eye and flew home in silence. Seat 14A, noise-canceling headphones, no music, just the dull hum of engines and a mind slowly sorting through 10 years of neglected details. My apartment looked the same as it did the day she left. I'd never changed the couch. Still had the creaky drawer in the kitchen where we used to keep receipts. The walls were bare, had been since she took the aesthetic stuff. All that remained was a simple bookshelf, a cheap espresso machine, and a false floorboard under the bed. I knelt, pulled it loose. The safe clicked open like it had been waiting. Inside, a single file, matte black, worn at the corners, labeled in her handwriting, back when she still trusted mine. Operating Agreement V1, 0. I flipped to page 47, didn't need a bookmark. My thumb knew the thickness. There it was, Clause 17C. Founding license remains active and protected except in cases of demonstrable public defamation by a co-founder, in which case it may be revoked at will by the licensed contributor. Activation requires time-stamped evidence submitted to legal. Compliance must validate revocation within 72 hours. She never read past the first 10 pages. Back then, she was all vision, no detail. I was the one who wrote most of the contract's bones, because lawyers were expensive and time was tighter than sleep. She never asked why I wanted the clause. Sounds dramatic, she had said once, glancing at the draft while eating cereal. We're not going to defame each other. We're not in high school. No, we weren't. But I knew better than to assume clean exits in messy ventures. I scanned the page into a new PDF, slapped a fresh timestamp on it, and began sorting my digital archive. Server access logs from the original prototype days, emails with the first design mockups, my headers, my comments. Git commit history tied to my personal repo. Her team had since layered shiny features on top of the product, but the foundation, the architecture, that was mine, still running on the same original license key I generated. I had kept everything, not because I wanted to use it, but because I knew she wouldn't. At 4:38 a.m., I made one call, not to a lawyer, not to a fixer, to Paul Norelli, ex-colleague, compliance auditor, and the one man who understood what the clause actually meant in practice. He picked up on the third ring, groggy. Donovan, he mumbled. It's been, what, 6 years? 7, I said. But I kept the papers. Pause. No kidding. I need eyes on an activation packet. You remember 17C? He chuckled softly. The nuclear clause. Yeah, I remember. I'm triggering it. Got a gala speech, time-stamped, footage, her words. Does legal even know it still exists? Nope, that's the fun part. He whistled. You want surgical or scorched earth? Surgical, clean incision, no media, no leaks. You sure? After what she said? I'm not interested in dragging her, just in making sure she doesn't get to drag me and walk away with the bricks I laid. There was a beat of silence on the line. Then, email me the materials. I'll get you a compliance-ready packet by morning. As I hung up, I stared at the screen. The footage was paused right on her smile, her practice smile, the one that said she thought she'd already won. What she never understood is that I don't fight loud. I build quiet and dismantle quieter. The clip hit the internet faster than I expected. One of her interns, probably thinking they were doing her a favor, cut her practice line into a sassy little montage with sparkle transitions and trap music. From 0 to CEO # practice makes perfect. Captioned, branded, and reposted 1,000 times before breakfast. She'd made herself into a meme. Unfortunately for her, memes have timestamps. By the time the board was waking up to it, I was 3 hours deep into my own archive, drinking lukewarm black coffee from a chipped mug with her old logo on it. A logo I sketched, by the way, on a bar napkin, the same one still framed on her office wall. The paper trail wasn't stored neatly. It was scattered on 2 old drives, a dying laptop with a cracked screen, and an encrypted backup I hadn't touched since the pandemic. But I knew where to look, knew what mattered. First, the code logs, the original backend system, time-stamped, early commits made from my machine, my GitHub handle. She never asked to switch the repository, just assumed her in-house team rewrote it all later. They didn't. They just built on top of it. That meant her entire infrastructure still pinged a licensing check tied to my original node, and that meant, legally, it wasn't just technical debt. It was mine. Then came the client contracts. I printed the first one, an online therapy startup I'd wrangled during a networking brunch she skipped to focus. They signed on napkins. I filed the final contract in my name before transferring it to the company, back when we didn't even have a proper name. Their signature was on it. So was mine. Hers wasn't. I found a scanned copy of the bank transfer that kept the servers running during our first spike. I'd moved $5,000 from my personal savings to cover the AWS bill she forgot, labeled it temporary float, expecting it back. I never got it. Petty? Maybe. But documentation doesn't care about pride, it just exists. Next came the email threads. Buried in old inboxes were conversations where she'd deferred technical decisions to me, acknowledged my authority on licensing, and, in one particularly useful thread, signed off on the clause for peace of mind with a little smiley face. She always thought words were tools for charm. I treated them like contracts. It was strange, really, how much she left behind, how little she cleaned up after herself. I suppose when someone climbs high enough, they stop looking down. They assume the scaffolding will hold, but that scaffolding had my fingerprints all over it, and now it was getting dismantled one bolt at a time. I didn't want the company. I didn't want her investors. Hell, I didn't even want to be in the building again. I just wanted the license, the one part of the machinery she couldn't replicate or outsource, the foundation, the OS kernel to her sleek little GUI empire. Without it, her architecture was decorative. I bundled everything, code logs, contracts, screenshots, notarized PDFs, into a single encrypted folder and named it something fitting, /root/buried-proof/Paul called that afternoon. I ran the footage against the clause wording. It's airtight. Her quote qualifies. You want me to notify legal? Not yet, I said. One more thing. He waited. I want them to see what they missed. I want them to feel stupid. Let the clip marinate a bit. Give them time to congratulate her. Then we cut the feed. Paul chuckled. Cold. Clean, I corrected, because this wasn't about rage. Rage burns fast. This was about anatomy, cutting along muscle lines, severing the right nerve at the right time, surgical. She'd never see the blade coming, just the blood. The email took 12 minutes to write, 5 to edit, and half a second to send. Subject, triggering 17C, see attached timestamped footage. Body, as per the operating agreement, V10, clause 17C, this communication serves as formal notice of license revocation effective 12 a.m. tonight. See attached evidence. Gala video excerpt, 0 hours 1 minute and 34 seconds, 0 hours 1 minute and 42 seconds. Transcript, co-founder acknowledgement, archived signature, licensing confirmation, audit trail included, all materials validated by third-party compliance. Regards, Donovan Ridge. No flourish, no dramatic flair, just pressure applied to the right artery. I hit send, then I made tea. It was chamomile. I didn't even like it, but it gave me something to do with my hands. The first response came exactly 22 minutes later. Urgent, licensing clarification, from some poor paralegal probably told to stall. I didn't open it. 2 minutes after that, her assistant called, twice, then texted, can we clarify what this is? It seems like some kind of prank. Cute. At 11:16 a.m., the head of legal called directly. I let it ring. Then I sent the email again. Same subject, same files. Just added one line to the body. Per clause conditions, this is not subject to arbitration. And waited. People always think the explosion is the satisfying part. It's not. It's the silence before. The exact moment when everyone realizes they've stepped off solid ground and don't know how far the drop is. By early afternoon, the gala video, her video, was still trending. Still bouncing across platforms with people cheering her boldness, her zero tolerance for dead weight. She was probably still basking in it, her little coronation. But in their internal Slack, the legal thread was already hitting critical mass. I knew this because Paul forwarded me a redacted screenshot. Thread name, urgent, clause 17C, WTF is this? Comment from general counsel. Why wasn't this flagged in the last compliance review? Reply from junior counsel. Never saw it. It's not in the 2.1 version. Reply from Paul. Because the original license still governs the core architecture. See footer. I sipped my tea. Cold now. She called at 2:07 p.m. I stared at the screen. The name flashing. Allison. With that same photo she uploaded years ago, back when her contact name in my phone still had a heart next to it. I let it ring out. She called again at 2:09, then 2:11. Then she tried from her assistant's phone. I copied the same message I had sent legal and pasted it into a text. No greeting, no signature, just the link, just the hammer. Revocation effective midnight. At 3:30 p.m., Paul texted me. They're scrambling. Can't get a straight answer from IT yet, but panic mode's active. Security already printed your clause and pinned it on legal's whiteboard. That made me smile. At 5 p.m., I turned off my phone. Not because I didn't want to hear them beg, but because by then, everything that needed to happen had already started happening. The firm's operating system, its backbone, its DNA, still relied on the original licensing agreement, the one tied to the repository I built, the one triggered by a compliance lock if revoked. They'd built layers on top of it, UI, analytics, investor dashboards, but underneath, the bones were mine, and now the marrow was being drained. By midnight, they wouldn't crash. That would have been too theatrical. They would freeze, a stillness, an eerie pause in data flow, just long enough for every client to ask, what's happening? And by the time they answered, the license would be gone. At exactly 12:01 a.m., a silent tremor passed through the company's infrastructure, too quiet for alarms but loud enough to snap every back-end service into a hiccup. Just a flicker, a blink. For 10 seconds, client dashboards stalled mid-load. The AI models paused their output streams, and then the spinning wheels started multiplying, circles chasing themselves with no result. On the surface, it looked like a server load issue, a minor bug, something a junior dev could patch by sunrise. But it wasn't. The compliance key at the core of their system had just failed its midnight ping. Validation error, authorization key revoked, clause 17C compliance lock engaged. Timestamp 12 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds AM EST. The kill switch didn't delete anything. It didn't scream, didn't flash, didn't break. It just withheld. It was designed that way. By 12:04, Slack exploded. Hash alerts, dev, hash alerts, ops, hash alerts, client facing. By 12:07, her phone lit up, first with texts, then with actual calls, a sequence so rapid it looked like a glitch. Each notification buzzed before the previous one faded. She was still in the penthouse suite above the ballroom, half a flute of Prosecco left on the windowsill, heels kicked off, makeup smudged from dancing and praise. She glanced at the phone, annoyed, thought it was probably another congratulatory message. Then she saw the words, urgent, clients locked out, can't access premium tier backend validation failing. She called her CTO, no answer, called again, then legal. By 12:12, she was in the lobby, barefoot in a silk gown and trench coat, screaming at the concierge for her car. The ride over was silent except for the sound of her tapping, furious Slack messages and all-caps emails. Fix it. Why now? Where is the team? At 12:31, she burst into HQ like a storm in velvet, heels back on, mascara smeared down one cheek. It was gathered in a semicircle around a glowing monitor. They parted as she stormed in, her stilettos clapping like warning shots on the polished tile. Talk, she barked. Now. No one spoke, just turned the screen toward her. There, in black and white, authorization key, revoked compliance lock, clause 17C triggered effective, 0 o'clock EST issued by Donovan Ridge validation node, inactive override, not available. She stared at it, blinked, shook her head like the screen might change if she looked hard enough. What the hell is clause 17C? She demanded. No one answered, because none of them had ever heard of it. One brave intern opened a PDF Paul had just sent over, the original operating agreement, page 47. He read aloud, voice cracking halfway through the clause. Her face turned white. That's not enforceable, she whispered. The head of legal, now fully dressed but visibly sweating, shook his head. It's signed, notarized, time-stamped. He triggered it within conditions. We missed it in the restructure. But we did a full audit, she hissed. Of the new agreement, legal muttered. The foundation still operates under V1.0. She looked around the room, at engineers she'd bragged about hiring from Google, at lawyers who once called her the sharpest in the valley. None of them could meet her eyes, because none of them had seen the knife coming. She turned to the screen again, tapped it with a manicured finger like it might respond differently this time. Fix it, reboot it. I don't care if you have to call the NSA. Fix it. We can't, the CTO said quietly. We're locked out of the license validator. The root node is external. It always has been. Whose idea was that? He didn't answer, because everyone in that room knew the answer, hers. She was the one who told him years ago, just use Donovan's node, he'll never pull it. Now she was watching the very thing she dismissed turn to ice beneath her. No screaming could thaw it, no threat could reverse the clock, and no one in that room could undo the fact that everything she built sat atop something, someone she called a stepping stone. Now the foundation was gone, and the castle was silent. By 7:45 a.m., the boardroom was full. No croissants, no cappuccinos, just silent suits and bleary eyes, half of them still in the clothes they wore to last night's gala. The other half looked like they'd slept in their cars, because some of them had. The CTO hadn't even changed. He stood at the far end of the table, arms crossed, jaw clenched like someone awaiting sentencing. She walked in late, not her usual kind of late, the kind that made a statement. This was the other kind, the rattled kind. The kind that suggested she'd spent the morning trying to rewrite the past through sheer willpower and contouring. No one smiled. Where are we on restoration? She asked, voice hoarse, trying to assert control. No one answered. Finally, the general counsel cleared his throat and adjusted his tie, which didn't quite go with his shirt. We've reviewed the original operating documents. The license was valid. Clause 17C was active, and based on the time-stamped footage, the trigger condition was met. That clause wasn't even in the last agreement, she snapped. He nodded, slow. It wasn't in the new agreement. But the original license is still the backbone of the validation system, and he, Mr. Ridge, never signed a reassignment, so his framework, his key, and his clause all stand. Silence. Someone shifted, a chair creaked. Then the head of product, always the first to throw a dart once the lights come on, leaned in and asked quietly, "How did we forget about this?" A low murmur of agreement rolled through the room. Not anger, worse, incredulity, like a collective waking dream, like they'd all just realized the floor beneath them had always been made of glass. "It was just a line in an old draft," she muttered, eyes fixed on a corner of the table. He never pushed for board seats. He didn't even want equity." "No," the general counsel said. "He wanted the license. And we let him keep it," someone else added. Someone on the finance side pulled up a shared screen. It showed the chain of dependencies tied to the original validator node, donridge.core.validation.net, still pinging, still central. Everything from logins to customer behavior analytics to premium feature gating was tied to that one access key. "Why didn't anyone rebuild the root system?" another board member asked, tone too sharp to be rhetorical. "Because she told us not to," the CTO said flatly. All eyes turned to her again. The truth was ugly. She had laughed off the clause when I'd written it. "You sound like you expect me to trash you on national TV," she had said once, lying on the couch while I typed on her old ThinkPad. "You're too dramatic." I'd nodded, said nothing, typed anyway. Now in that glass-paneled boardroom with a view of a skyline that used to feel like hers, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Pale, like the gravity had shifted and left her hollow. "This isn't just a glitch," the CFO muttered. "We're dead in the water. Clients are locked out. Products can't be verified. Support tickets have tripled in the last 6 hours." She finally stood, gripping the back of her chair. "Okay," she said. "Let's call him. We'll make an offer." "No," legal replied, tapping a folder. "He already declined, twice." She blinked. "What?" He responded via his compliance liaison. "All negotiations go through the license reissuance process, and he's not reissuing anything yet. So he wants money." "No," the liaison said, tone clipped. "He wants acknowledgement." There it was. Not cash, not control, just to be seen, just to be unerased. And in doing that, he'd just erased her. A legal assistant stepped in, whispering something into the general counsel's ear. He nodded, turned to the group, and said, "Also, his name is still on every foundational asset, the repo, the validator, the original SDK contracts, all signed under his Dev LLC, still active. None of them were reassigned post-Series A. The auditors confirmed it." Another voice, barely above a whisper. "So we built everything? On borrowed time?" She sank back into her chair. No arguments, no rebuttals, just silence. Not the kind that waits for someone to speak, the kind that realizes the cliff edge was behind them the whole time. The call came at 9:41 p.m. I let it ring 3 times, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted her to feel the suspense, just long enough for her to imagine I wouldn't pick up at all. Then I answered, didn't speak, just waited. Her breath hit the line before her voice did, shallow, irregular, the kind that comes when someone's holding back panic but doesn't want to sound weak. "Donovan," she said, soft, uncertain. I stayed quiet. "I didn't mean it like that." Still nothing. She took a shaky inhale, then tried again. It was a joke, just a line. You know me. You know I would never. I didn't think it would go viral. I didn't think anyone even remembered." I spoke finally, calm, steady. "That's the problem. You didn't think." Pause. "I didn't mean to humiliate you." "But you did." Her voice dropped to a whisper, like she thought maybe the lower the volume, the less true it would sound. I was just trying to sound confident up there. It was a big night. I thought if I framed it as a journey, with practice and then growth." "You framed it," I said, cutting in, "like I was a pair of worn-out shoes you left behind in a motel." Her silence wasn't guilt. It was fear masquerading as empathy. I could hear it in the way she swallowed. "Can we talk?" she asked, desperate now. "I mean, really talk? Not with lawyers, just us." I pictured her, probably sitting in that corner office with the fogged-up glass, staring at the skyline she used to command, hoping to scrape together some dignity from the ruins. I imagined the trembling fingers around her overpriced mug, the assistant she sent home early to look brave, the half-written apology email in her drafts she knew I'd never open. I leaned back in my chair and looked out my own window. No skyline, no skyscraper glow, just streetlights and the hum of a city that doesn't pretend to care who's winning. "You built your empire on what I started," I said slowly. And then you stood on stage, popped a bottle, and mocked the bricklayer in front of the crowd. Silence. Then a quiet, broken, I know. But you didn't just forget me, I continued. You built monuments on my silence. You counted on me staying quiet. You banked on it. She tried to speak. I didn't let her. I stayed quiet because I thought you'd remember where the first stone came from. You didn't. I could hear her breathing shift, those sharp little gasps when someone is fighting not to cry but knows the dam's already cracked. I'm sorry, she said, and it sounded like it was costing her everything. I'm really, click, not rage, not pettiness, just enough. She'd called to negotiate, but this wasn't a deal. This was a verdict. At 7 a.m., they locked the glass door to the 19th floor boardroom, not for optics, but for necessity. The invite list had been stripped. Her name wasn't on it. It wasn't just that she'd lost favor. It was that she'd become a liability. The kind you don't just sideline, you contain. The general counsel stood at the front of the room with a presentation that had no colors, no brand fonts, no mission statement quotes, just stark white slides and bullet points written in the kind of language that meant someone had consulted their malpractice insurance before opening PowerPoint. 2 options, he said, fight or fold. No one asked him to clarify. Everyone in the room knew what each meant. Fight meant dragging this into court, challenging the clause, risking headlines, client attrition, even worse, investor confidence. Fold meant accepting that Donovan held the matchbook and praying he'd only light one. Someone from investor relations raised a hand. Can we even rebuild the infrastructure fast enough to pivot? No, the CTO said flatly, not without a 1.5 years minimum, and we'd still be relying on some of his legacy code through API gateways. What if we offer him a seat? A voice ventured from the legal side. He doesn't want a seat, the head of finance said. He wants terms, and he's earned the right to name them. Silence. Then a voice from the back of the room, older, unshaken. One of the early angel investors, long retired from day to day but still holding considerable weight. Let him write the damn check. He built the foundation. She's the one who mocked the architect in public. You don't spit on the cement and expect the building to hold. The vote wasn't officially called, but everyone saw where the wind was blowing. Nods around the table, no objections, just tired agreement, the kind that tastes like aspirin and regret. Okay, legal said. We'll draft an offer. Full compliance transfer, licensing authority backdated. He chooses the terms of reissuance. We put his name on the masthead. Hers comes off all product comms. And, this came through just before the meeting, he included one final clause in the response packet. He turned to the next slide. One line of text. No contact, no rebuttal, no redemption arc. A few people chuckled, uncomfortably. No one dared suggest fighting anymore. Across the hall, in her corner office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling view of the city she used to command, she sat in silence. Phone dark, email locked, Slack access revoked hours earlier. She'd felt the shift, the silence that meant decisions were being made without her, the kind of silence she used to weaponize. Now, it was aimed at her. She stood, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the elevator. Security was waiting outside the door. 2 of them. Not aggressive, just present. She kept her eyes forward, didn't flinch, but when she reached for her badge and pressed it to the reader, the scanner lit red. Access denied. A soft buzz. Then stillness. The taller guard took a half step forward, not speaking. She didn't yell, not yet. She stared at the reader like it had glitched, then tried again. Red. The guard finally spoke, voice low. You'll be escorted to collect your personal items. We've been asked to remain discreet. She looked past him, to the hallway where the boardroom door remained shut, where decisions were still being made that used to require her signature. Now, she wasn't even on the CC line. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because no one had fired her, no one had sent a memo, they just removed the stage, and the spotlight followed someone else. They expected him to demand control. That's what people like her feared most, that the quiet ones secretly wanted the throne, that all that silence had been strategy, not restraint, that the moment the tables turned, the supporting character would suddenly leap onto the main stage and claim the crown. But Donovan didn't want the crown. He wanted the scaffolding. The offer arrived in the board's inbox at 10:03 a.m. sharp. No cover letter, no greetings. Just a single PDF titled License Reissuance Terms Final. Inside, 4 pages. Clean, surgical, every clause enforceable, pre-checked by Paul's compliance team. No fluff. Core conditions: reinstatement of licensing authority under his Dev LLC, non-transferable, perpetual, 7-figure upfront payment, wire only, no installment plans, brand attribution, all products derived from the core architecture must display his signature line, powered by Ridge systems in footer, metadata, and developer docs, public recognition in investor reports and press releases, no omissions. She is to be removed from all external communications, product naming, marketing assets, and press events. No NDA, no non-disparagement clause. Clause 17C will remain active permanently. It wasn't a hostile takeover, it was a scalpel to the ego. The CFO tried to negotiate. Paul shut it down. These terms aren't flexible, he said calmly. You want your systems back online by tomorrow? You sign now. If not, Donovan's prepared to let the whole thing rot while you rebuild from scratch. The board didn't vote. They didn't need to. The wire transfer went out by noon. By 2:30 p.m., the website updated, quietly, without fanfare. But people noticed. Where there once was her name on the splash page, a vision by Allison Reese, there was nothing. Scroll to the bottom, though, and there it was, powered by Ridge Systems. A tiny phrase, small font, unassuming, but for those who knew, it was a branding scar. Clients started asking questions in chat forums. Who's Ridge Systems? Is this a buyout? Did something happen? No official answers came, only silence, carefully curated silence, the kind that says yes without ever saying why. Internally, emails were scrubbed, old blog posts quietly edited, the About Us page lost a photo, her photo. She was still a shareholder, still got quarterly updates, but her name, her face, her narrative, gone. Clause 17C became legend. It made the rounds in founder circles like some kind of folklore cautionary tale. Tech Twitter turned it into a meme. Don't 17C yourself. Venture podcasts started using it as a case study in contract literacy. Even law firms began referencing it in onboarding decks. And Donovan? He didn't gloat, didn't give interviews, didn't tweet. He just kept his systems running, invoices paid on time, and watched as the tech world slowly rewrote its heroes and quietly remembered the architects they'd erased. His was the name in the fine print now, and hers? She'd become the ghost in the metadata. The auditorium lights dim as the last slide clicks into place. Her face, perfectly framed, carefully lit, smiles at the audience with that same practiced warmth she used to reserve for press junkets and investor dinners. The backdrop is modest, a small college in Portland, something with innovation in the name. Fewer cameras, less glitz, a safer venue now that the shine is dulled. She's giving a talk on resilience and leadership. Of course she is. Wearing charcoal slacks and a navy blouse, she paces the stage slowly, measured, like someone who's taken a few too many public speaking courses. She nods meaningfully when she talks about failure as a stepping stone. She makes a strained joke about cancel culture, and the audience gives her the polite chuckle she's clearly practiced for. But the sparkle in her eye? It's gone, replaced by the shimmer of someone who's been living in the aftershock of her own undoing, the kind of undoing that doesn't scream. It just reconfigures the floor beneath you until nothing quite balances anymore. During the Quanda, most of the questions are softballs. What inspires her? How does she balance vision with operations? What book changed her life? Then, from the back row, a male student, probably early 20s, too young to be intimidated, too smart to be deferential, raises his hand. Yeah, hi, he says. I just wanted to ask, was it true? About the founding license? That you lost it because of a clause? The room tenses. A few people lean forward. She smiles, but her jaw tightens at the hinge. I'm not sure where you heard that, she says lightly. TechCrunch, he replies. A beat. She glances toward the moderator, who suddenly finds something interesting in their water bottle. She exhales, leans into the mic. It was resolved amicably, she says, voice even. Some things just evolve. A few people nod. Some don't buy it. The Quanda ends shortly after. She steps off stage to modest applause. No standing ovation, no rush for selfies, just a few kind words, some thank yous, and then she's escorted to the green room where she pulls off her heels and stares blankly at a bottle of still water. Across town, Donovan sits in a sunlit co-working space in a quiet corner, headphones on, hoodie up. He's not watching the talk, he's editing license documentation. The new revision of the API compliance sheet goes live in 15 minutes. His coffee is cold. He doesn't care. He clicks open a tab in his admin panel, ridgecore.dev/license, and scrolls down to the clause section. There it is. Clause 17C, public defamation consequence, still active. He adds a footnote, just a small update to clarify that non-verbal gestures of contempt, if publicly recorded and clearly directed at the license holder, also qualify as breach material. It's legally unnecessary, but it makes the point. He saves the update, sits back, no fireworks, no press, just the knowledge that the license lives on, that she can spin whatever tale she wants from whatever stage will still have her, but the foundation now bears a watermark she'll never scrub off, and unlike her smile, it doesn't crack under pressure, it just waits.